What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and this one will break down what's going on in Tesla stock, Nvda, SPY, the QQQ, and many tickers out there. I'm going to break down what's happening to the overall market, what the news is saying about Tesla, what you should be watched for as time progresses and we approach the earnings cycle. But before I break anything down on all of this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I am not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon, in just about 9 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, guys, so when it comes to the market, what on earth is going on? And the answer is we have something very big that's going to affect the markets. That's going to be both earnings and the FOMC meeting coming out for the week. But to start us off, we are looking relatively weak approaching the big events on Tesla, SPY, and many other tickers. So I'm going to break that down from a technical standpoint in just a couple of minutes. Let's first talk about the market real quick. So let's now talk about earnings. We have on Monday Domino's Pizza, Philips, and just a couple of others, a couple of banks as well, like the Bank of Hawaii, and the list goes on for before the market opens on Monday. And then after the market closes, we have Whirlpool, not to mention like Logitech and a couple of others, and nothing else that's too massive from there. But things get very serious starting on Tuesday when we have Verizon, we have GM, 3M, Spotify, and the list goes on before the market opens. Then we have Microsoft, Google/Alphabet, Snap, and the list goes on after that. Big tech earnings start right over there. Then for Wednesday, we have AT&T and Meta. For Thursday, we have McDonald's, Intel, and Roku, and just a couple of others. And then for Friday, we have like a bunch of like energy companies, ExxonMobil, and the list goes on. So very, very big earnings are coming out. In my opinion, though, let me just mention that when it comes to big tech earnings, okay, I'm not too sure about how Google and Meta and Intel and all these big companies will do, especially like Coca-Cola. I'm not as confident about every single one of these, but I am quite confident that Microsoft is going to do relatively well looking at their AI developments and some big announcements they could be making about revenue and getting more revenue from AI by charging for new services. So that once again is like quite bullish news for them. Don't forget when the market says AI, the market likes to jump. If these companies talk about AI, that could be very bullish too. So I'm quite optimistic about Microsoft. I'm not too sure about the others. That could be very, very ambiguous. So make sure you're ready for this. Now, to add on to this, don't forget that on Wednesday, we have Meta's earnings. But on top of that, we have something very big. We have the FOMC meeting. We have Jerome Powell speaking and the next rate hike decision to be made. Currently, there's more than a 99% chance we're going to get another rate hike as the Fed is looking at the unemployment numbers looking way too low, and they want there to be a reset, so that's going to be very important moving forward. But I will talk more about the Fed a little bit later on. For tomorrow specifically, we do have some data dropping at 15 minutes after the market opens, 15 minutes after open, sorry. We have the PMI report coming out for the global manufacturing data, the global composite, and then the global services. This will give us a good gauge about how different sectors are doing the economy, and we're going to see if we're seeing more signals of a contraction or anything like that. So in my opinion, we're likely going to see that, and this will have a big effect on the market during the first 15 minutes. Expect some volatility 15 minutes after market open at 9:45 a.m. Eastern time or New York time if you're on the East Coast. All right, so that's going to be the only data coming out for tomorrow that's significant. Besides that, it's all going to be on earnings. Now, as far as Tesla goes, there were some headlines that came out. There is news that Cathie Wood sold off $21 million of Tesla stock hours before the earnings dip. And once again, she's starting to scoop up the stock going forward. So she started to buy in, or there's like a good chance she's going to be buying these dips on Tesla. But I just want to note that she did sell it before the earnings dip. There's no surprises about that because there were many expectations of downside looking at the margins after what those analysts were saying. And I did warn you guys about that as well. Now, there's also news that came out about how Tesla's opening up a new financing option for the EV customers, and they've launched an 84-month financing plan. That's once again very good, and that's how they're going to be offsetting many of these new rate hikes. So this in turn is going to help more customers for more affordable options, if anything. And this is another trick and strategy that Tesla is going to be using to incentivize more growth and to get more sales. Is this good news? I would say yes. I mean, they're doing whatever they can and whatever is possible. But the thing about that is it's just showing that if they keep on resorting to things like this, it just shows that demand and keeping demand high is becoming more difficult for Tesla. And it also tells me that Tesla has some struggles that they are fighting, like they told us about Q3 as production is going to get cut. So that tells me that things are getting tougher for them. And this could end up affecting their margins later on down the road, as Tesla has once again reduced more and more of their prices. Let me just close that ad. Sorry about that, guys. They're going to be reducing the new inventory prices as the Model 3 is starting at $37,940 after the tax credit that is. That's once again very important and worth noting. Tesla has to continue reducing their prices to bring up demand, and that is once again hurting those margins, the operating margins especially. So we have to be very careful with all of these pieces of news. This just came out yesterday, so be very careful with Tesla cutting prices. And if they keep this up, okay, may not see the best earnings going into Q3, unfortunately. So I just want you guys to know that, be prepared for this, and this is making some big headlines. Now, as far as their inventory levels go, unfortunately, we're starting to see inventories go up for the Model Y, the Model S, the X, and basically every model except for the Model X. This was high for the last week, but it's been kind of stagnant since. But besides that, most of these are starting to respect uptrends, which is showing that the backlog is getting bigger and bigger. Now, as this happens, this is why Tesla has been working very hard to incentivize more buying, more and more sales. That's why they're coming up with the new lease options and trying to cut some prices here and there. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And Tesla will try to do whatever it takes to reach their goals. Now, one of the things that Elon Musk said on the team during the previous earnings, or the penultimate earnings, if anything, was that Tesla is willing to, take hits to maintain their sales, but there could be this big difference between production and deliveries moving forward as well. So it's worth noting this is what happens during a recessionary environment with higher interest rates, and this is adding costs for Tesla, like Elon Musk said before, unfortunately. Now, when it comes to Tradeitics and the data that just came out, I just want to note that Tesla currently has a weakening price pairs ratio. It is losing lots of the strength it had approaching its earnings, and it's still looking relatively weak. Morgan Stanley just came out a couple of days ago and they said that they gave Tesla an equal weight rating, saying it's going to perform equally with the markets. And besides that, Tesla tends to do relatively well on Mondays, about 53% of the time. But like I said before, July tends to be a weaker month for Tesla historically. And we started off on a strong end in July, but then we ended up turning red as time went on. And this may continue for the next week with big earnings coming out. So just be very careful with all this data dropping. We tend to do very well during the second and fourth hours of the day. Watch Tesla specifically during these hours if you're interested, and be very careful as we could see a big surge of volatility at those times. The short interest on Tesla went up to about 48 million just a couple of days ago, but it reduced on Friday to about 41 million. We're still starting to see more of these Tesla shares being shorted. As the short interest is going up, this is playing a big role in why Tesla is slowing down. Shorts can be relentless many, many times. Also, what's not so good is Tesla did drop in the morning on high volume on Friday with 162 million in volume. That's once again playing a big role in why Tesla's underperforming. So now let's break down these charts, what's going on with them. So looking at Tesla, currently, as I look at this thing has a bearish looking signal on the 4-hour PPO. Continuing to downtrend as time goes on. It's looking a little bit weak as we're getting very close to our 200 EMA. And I do believe there's a good chance we're going to test it because there's still so much bearish momentum as we formed this divergence. And to add on to this, I just want to mention that the shorts are starting to pile in a little bit more. We saw the short interest go up a little bit. So as the short interest is increasing, once again, the shorts are just continuing to do what they have to do. We also saw a lot of dark pool volume on Tesla right before we ended up getting the sell-off. So that had to do with more manipulation. And as this continues, Tesla's being manipulated and this thing is slowing down moving forward. The 4 hours looking more bearish. The 30-minute also looks a little bit more bearish. Not as bearish, but overall, we could see that there were some more fluctuations after we saw an attempt to balance, but it didn't really hold up nicely. And then on the daily chart, I just want to mention that it's still looking quite bearish if you just look at it on the MACD. So most of these charts are still looking quite bearish for the market and Tesla. SPY and the QQQ are looking especially bearish, and I think this will play a big role for Tesla. So what levels am I going to be watching for? So just so you guys know, I'm going to be unbiased first when I say this, and I'm going to talk about my prediction. There's going to be two different things, okay? So the unbiased analysis would be, we have resistance at 260, 262.5, 265, 267.5, 270, 272, and 275. Those are all like some minor resistance levels, which are worth mentioning. When it breaks past one, you want to watch the next one, but don't treat them all exactly the same. You could see that in this range right here, this is more significant than like these levels right here. But if it breaks down, you have 255 as support. There's some support at 254.25, then there's 252.5, 250, and then the 247 area around there. So those are some levels worth mentioning as support and resistance levels. What do I think Tesla's going to do? Well, honestly, guys, I'm seeing a trend that's very likely, and that is we have a tendency of either gapping up or trying to push up in the pre-market, then we slow down as time goes on. And I think this trend is likely going to continue for Tesla. I believe Tesla is going to actually try to gap up, make its way up very close to this like 262.5 to 265 area. Then it's going to likely reject off that and slow down as the day goes on, fill the gap that formed below, and eventually we're going to see Tesla retest 255. If that breaks, we're going to be watching this level right here. Now, there were support levels I mentioned previously, but the more significant one is going to be around this 4-hour 200 EMA at 251. I think Tesla's going to come all the way down there if we do end up breaking 255. That's going to be the level to watch for tomorrow. So watch for a potential gap to the upside, sideways price action, then some more downside a little bit later, and we'll see if Tesla tries to hold or if it continues to drop. For SPY, I'm seeing basically the same thing, and unfortunately, it's looking like we're forming an inverse cup and handle like formation on the 4-hour time frame. On the 30 minutes time frame, it's showing the same thing. Right here, let me just show you. This is looking like an inverse cup and handle, and we're likely going to be testing our 50 EMA very soon. We also have this imbalance down here at 450. I believe SPY has the potential to try to gap up a little bit and then end up coming down. Here are some levels to watch for on SPY. If this thing wants to go up, you're going to be watching this 452.69 area. If that breaks, there's 453, 453.5, and then 454. If it breaks down, watch 451.5, 451, 450.5, then the 448 area below 450. Now, what do I think is more likely? I think this thing was going to likely gap up to about 453 around that area where this 50 EMA happens to be in the 453s. Then we're going to see this thing slow down once again and retest the low right here. And I think if this breaks as soon as tomorrow, we're going to be watching 450 on SPY. And if that fails us, there's 448. Okay, those are some very specific levels. I think it's going to gap up and drop just like Tesla. And I think Tesla's going to be dictated by it. Now, looking at Apple, this was looking relatively weak, breaking below 192.5. I think it's going to gap up to about the 192.95 area around these EMAs, then come right back down to like 192 flat and eventually break down and test this low down here. And if it breaks below it, it is looking relatively weak and looks like the odds favor downside. We're going to see Apple retest 190 most likely over the next couple of days. It's looking relatively weak, so please be prepared for that. Now, I just want to mention something else after I talk about the QQQ. The QQQ is also looking kind of weak. We have an unfilled gap down at 373. I think the odds favor us filling that gap. It might gap up and test our 30 minutes 50 EMA as a resistance level. So you can see this yellow line is acting as resistance for the last couple of days. We may retest around 377, then get rejection and come down to 373. So I'm going to be watching that very carefully. And I think it's very likely that's going to happen as we retest resistance before coming down to about 373 very soon on the QQQ. For Nvidia, I think Nvidia is a great company, but I think it's going to do something similar to the QQQ, retest like 452 or so, and then come right back down to about this 440 level. And if we break below 440, we could see like 435 on it. It is still looking a little bit more bearish, but it's okay because I'm expecting a very big bounce approaching earnings, like I said before. Microsoft, however, I think it's going to try to base around this 340 zone around here, then try to bounce because we have earnings coming out and we may see this thing pump approaching it. I'm going to be watching 350 on Microsoft. I also think that there's going to be a nice play on it. I think there's a good chance this thing may try to break, out of this wedge very soon. And I'm actually quite bullish for its earnings. I'm leaning more in the bullish direction for a nice pump. And also we have this imbalance up here around this like 356 level. We could be seeing that get filled as well. But after earnings, I think they're going to give us relatively good earnings. That's my prediction. And I have a feeling that they're going to do well. So this is going to be on my radar as well. For AMD, this thing is very close to its support. We're going to be watching 109, 107, and 105 as supports. For resistance, watch this 112 area and then 115. And then after that comes like this 117 area around there. So what am I watching for? I think this thing is going to gap up and try to retest like 115 where that imbalance is, this 115 area. Then it's going to reject off 115, come right back down to about 112. That's my target on AMD. I think it may do the opposite of the market. It may try to like pop with Nvda to retest that area, that imbalance, then come right back down. For Netflix, it's looking a little bit weak still. Actually, it broke below support, and we're going to be watching now this 420 area. It might try to gap up to about 433, then reject, and come right back down to about 425 in my opinion, but I could see it continuing to downtrend and eventually hitting 420 or lower. For the Nasdaq, it's looking kind of weak right now as well, testing its support just barely. But don't forget, if this support breaks, this gap support at the 50 EMA and the 30 minutes time frame, we have another gap down here around this 13,700 area. It's forming a head and shoulders, so the odds do favor maybe a bounce in the morning, maybe a retest of like 14,200, then this thing potentially coming down a little bit after that. Same thing on SPX. It looks very similar, potential head and shoulder forming with an inverse cup and handle. We're going to be watching if this thing could hold 4,500. I think if that breaks, not 4,500, sorry, 45.26. If that breaks, then we're going to be watching this come all the way down to about 4,500. So I think the odds do favor that. So be very careful. Watch for a potential push to the upside in the morning, then another drop after that. The VIX may bounce as well. Just looking at the trend, I mean, it is starting to make higher highs. So the market may cause this to go up and try to fill this gap up here around this like 14 level or even higher than that. The market may cause that, which is once again a bearish signal for the markets, which would be bullish for the VIX. The dollar is starting an uptrend. It's getting very close to fill its imbalance, which is all the way up around the 101 area. So it may try to fill that very soon. Coinbase may break below 100. I'm going to be looking for a small bounce. It's around 102.5, then a break below 100 to retest 97.5 or lower than that. For Google, it has earnings coming out, so it may try to hold around these levels. We could even see it try to retest like 122 or so, but I'd be very careful with it. It looks very flat and still looks very weak from a technical standpoint. There's no sign of it bouncing just yet, and I think it might gap up and slow down and get a retest of 118. Same thing with Amazon. It may gap up to about 131, a retest of like 131 to 131.8, then come down slowly and make its way down to fill this gap down here, or come very close to this gap level around this 125 area. That's my target on it. Watch for a potential push to the upside, this thing dropping later on for more bearish price action. For Meta, it may hold up. It's going to try to base very soon. It either tries to base around 290 or 287, somewhere around there. I think it's going to base, and then it's going to try to bounce. It's going to be one of those two, either the lowest and it bounces, or it comes down a little lower, then it bounces. Why? Because earnings is coming out, and we're likely going to see this thing make its way back up to about the 304 plus area, if not 307. All right, so watch for this thing to either come down to 287 then bounce, or bounce off the current low around 290, and then make its way back up to at least 304, then potentially 307. So that's what I'm seeing for Meta. Anyways, guys, that's what I have for this video. Thank you all so much for listening. As far as Tesla goes, I'm anticipating that this thing's looking weak. It's going to try to bounce first, though. We could see this thing try to bounce and get closer to about 262 to 265, then reject off that and slow down as the day goes on, which is likely going to happen. The news for Tesla has been quite negative so far, and for now, things are looking a little weak for the markets, but big tech will determine how this moves starting on Tuesday and beyond. So be on the lookout for all of this, not to mention FOMC for Wednesday. Until then, the trend on Tesla is still looking kind of weak, but things could change depending on big tech and the FOMC meeting. All right, guys, so that's what I have for this video. I want to keep this one kind of short. Tesla to the moon as the long term is still incredibly bright as it is for the entire market. And peace out.